So let's take a look at the arguing essay. And I'm giving you lots of options on this essay since it's worth the most amount of points of the essays in the course. Where's my podium? My computer's on. So let's start with the due dates for this. And of course, if you're watching this in the future, look on your own assignment for the due dates. Okay, so the introduction outline is due on the 2nd, 11:59 p.m. That's the Monday. That's the Monday we get back from Thanksgiving break. Rough draft is due on Wednesday the 4th, and then the final draft is due by noon on 12/6. I haven't told you guys yet, but because this week we have a paper due by noon on Friday, I will have office hours from 10 to 2 on Friday. All right, questions so far on the due dates. All right, so what are we doing here? You're going to write a 3.5 to 5-page paper, at least 1,200 words, presenting the arguments, proposing a change to an existing law or statute that fits into one of the categories below. Or you also have an option if you're more of a literature type, you can make an argument about some of the works of literature we use for the literary analysis paper. The purpose of the argument essay is to make a claim and defend it against competing claims, persuading someone to think or act differently. You should think about what other arguments could be made once you decide what you want to argue. And that's really one of the big things with an argumentative essay, that we don't just look for stuff that supports what we think, okay? You have to research the issue in its entirety before you formulate your opinion. We're just getting out of the political season now, so you know that is not the type of thinking that we often do when it relates to politics. It's more of a I'm right, you're wrong type of thing. But whereas with argumentative essay, you may still think I'm right, you're wrong, but you have to show the reader that you've looked at the entire issue before you've formulated your opinion. It's kind of like, think about it as you're a judge doing a bench trial. And I'm going to use a court reference quite a bit in this process. Think of yourself as a judge who's doing a bench trial, which means there's no jury. The defense is going to make their arguments. Prosecution is going to make their arguments, or defense and plaintiff. And then the judge has to take all that evidence and make a ruling. So they have to make an argument based on the evidence they've been given. That's basically the process you're going to be going through. You're going to be looking at each side of the issue, and you're probably going into it with what you think is your opinion, but you do need to research both sides because it's going to make you a more effective argumentative writer. Okay? The way that you're becoming a more effective argumentative writer is you are gaining the reader's trust. If you're walking down the street of a city and a homeless person is talking to themselves and looking up at the sky and saying, there's a comet that's going to hit here next week and it's going to end all life on Earth. And they says, and my toes are made of kittens. Okay, you're not going to trust that opinion, right? But if a group of scientists from MIT or Caltech or something like that, NASA says, there's a comet that's going to hit us next week and it's going to end all life on Earth. We're going to trust that, okay, because it has evidence behind it. All right? This is to be a formal, non-personal essay. So what I would like you to do is write in the third person as much as possible. Why is that? Well, if you write in the first person, too many sentences are going to start with, I think, I feel, I believe, in my opinion. That just takes up space, and it's not as firm. Think of these two sentences. I believe Pepsi is the best. I believe Pepsi is the best. Okay, Pepsi is the best. The second one's much stronger. Your name's on the paper, so your audience knows that it's your opinion. Okay? That's not to say I'm going to take off a bunch of points if you use some first person. Okay? But I want you to be thinking about limiting the first person as much as possible. Because once you get to 102, most of those papers are going to be written in third person. So this is a good transition to the next class. Okay? Follow closely the models provided in the arguing chapter of your textbook. Also, on my new YouTube channel, and I'll send it out as well, I have a video going over how to structure an argumentative essay. It's actually got my most hits. It's got like 500 views. Mr. Beast used to get that in the first 2 minutes of a video being posted. He's kind of faded now. Okay, so after reading the assigned sample essays and the sample arguing essay, there is an extra credit quiz that goes with the arguing essay. The sample arguing essay does not have any comments in the margins. So there's going to be an extra credit quiz where you read the sample arguing essay and answer some questions about it for some extra credits. So for those of you at the end of the term that are looking for a few extra points, that's a good way to go. All right. Your thesis will be of your own choosing on one of the following topics. Option 1. Propose a change to an existing law or statute that fits into one of the categories listed below. What you'll have to do for this paper is define the law both in letter and in spirit. Create an effective thesis that takes a clear stand on how you think the law should be changed, or a lot of controversial laws we might want to keep the same. That's another option. And uses successful evidence to support those claims. Now, before we get to what successful evidence is, let's make sure we define our terms. Define the law in letter and in spirit. What's the letter of the law? What do you think? What is the letter of the law supposed to be? Yeah, what it is, how it's written in the book, right? But the spirit of the law is what it's meant to do, right? The example I love to use is jaywalking, which, by the way, was just outlawed or was made legal in New York City. You don't have to cross crosswalks in New York City. Probably because jaywalking was so prevalent, it was just like, well, people can cross the street at their own risk. But anyway, the letter of the law for jaywalking states that you're supposed to cross the street at designated places. Crosswalks, intersections, that sort of thing. All right? And the spirit of that law is to keep pedestrians safe. Right? A lot of what prevents automobile accidents, especially pedestrians, is anticipation. You have no reason to think that that person walking down the street next to you is going to walk in front of you if you're not in a crosswalk. But if you're going to go to a crosswalk and you see somebody coming there, you know that that's a possibility. It's to keep pedestrians safe. That's the point of a jaywalking law. Well, if you find yourself on a country road at 3 o'clock in the morning and there's a big bright moon out, the street's well lit, you can see a mile in either direction. You know there's no cars coming. But the nearest crosswalk is 200 yards that way, but the house you want to go to is directly across the street. You're going to jaywalk, right? So technically you're breaking the letter of the law, how it's written. But you're not breaking the spirit. The spirit of the law is to protect people, okay? This is why we have a judicial branch of the government, right? They are to interpret the laws and also to interpret how the law is applied in certain situations. If I got a ticket for doing what I just described and took that to court, the judge would be so pissed at the cop for wasting his time, he you would likely throw it out. Not necessarily, because you are technically breaking the law, but you're not breaking the spirit. All right, questions on that? All right, so successful evidence, and this applies to option 2 as well, is evidence based on logic or ethical considerations or through expert opinions. In addition, you'll have to address the opposing arguments in your paper and refute them while still keeping a level tone and without using inflammatory language. I will provide that video I have on composing and outlining an argumentative essay to all my classes because it really shows you where the opposing argument should be, how you can use it as a launching point. We're going to talk about all those things through this unit. And we don't want to use inflammatory language. And the way you should think of it is the tone you should think of is like PBS. You know, if you watch a cable news network, whether it's Fox, MSN, CNN, you know, these commercial news organizations whose purpose is, yes, to present the news, but also it's for the company to make money, they tend to be more flamboyant, use more incendiary language. And this is both sides. This is regardless of where you are in the political spectrum. PBS tends to keep an even tone. They tend to debate, like NPR as well. You don't hear yelling on NPR, you know, for the most part. And that's the kind of tone we want to be thinking of. We want to keep an even tone. Think of it as a debate more than like a verbal argument. Questions? All right, so that's option 1. Option 2, make an argument that one of the stories from the choices in the short story analysis essay is just as meaningful today as when it was written. Okay, now if you did do a comparison where you compared it to today, you can't just recycle the paper. You have to write a new paper. And that's actually something that I want to make clear because it occasionally pops up. Did you know, say you took 101, right? And you wrote your paper on F. Scott Fitzgerald, right? And then you get to 102 and your teacher has a paper where you can use F. Scott Fitzgerald. If you use that paper from 101, you're plagiarizing, even though you wrote it. It's called self-plagiarism. It's actually in the student handbook where you're under the obligation to produce new material for each class assignment. So, with that being said, if you do pick the literature option, make sure that you write a new paper. All the stories on the list reposted below are over 50 years old and at minimum, but present a theme, issue, or idea that's just as pertinent in today's society as they were to the society that created it. If you choose this option, you will make an argument to prove that ideas presented in the story are just as valid as they were when the story was written. To address the counter-argument in this option, you would have to anticipate and refute any notions that your chosen story is just stuck in the past and not relevant to today's world. And you would have to use research for both of these options. Questions? All right. Sources. You do need to use sources for this paper. In order to aid you in making and or defending your claim, you will be required to use at least 4 outside sources, regardless of which of the options you choose. You will need to document your sources both in the body of your paper and on the final works cited page using MLA style. In addition to your book, Purdue University has an excellent online tutorial on how to do MLA citations. And you must follow the approved research material policy on the syllabus. That goes for the career essay and for this essay. Okay? So, just to review it real quick, if it's .gov or .edu, it comes from one of the library databases, or if it's paper source, for the most part, you don't have to get it approved. If it's .com, .org, .biz, .net, any of those things, then you just need to send me the link so I can look at it and approve it or not. Those of you who have asked for my approval on the sources for the career essay. I've approved the vast majority of them. Now, I do tend to decline more for the argumentative essay because sometimes people will stumble on a source that sounds great, but it has a bias. And we don't want that. All right, questions? All right, so if you're using option 1, you have to write about a law that is in one of the categories below. One of the categories below. These categories are pretty broad. Also, you do not have to have a black and white argument. Okay? And I'll get to that in a second. So, a good place to start for this paper is to find the topic on procon.org. That's a .org. You don't have to get approved. And try to find information on one of the following topics. You may ask you to do your own topic, but you'll have to get prior approval. You will want to avoid any topic where the first arguments you would make would be faith-based or emotion-based. So, abortion's out. For the most part, the death penalty is out because a lot of times the arguments are based on preconceived notions. And I really want you to go into your research, even if you believe you're on one side, I still want you to give the other side a valid shot before you formulate your opinion. Okay, so topic list, lowering the drinking age. And this is what I mean by it doesn't have to be black and white. You don't have to say an 18-year-old should get as many privileges as a 21-year-old. They can go by Everclear. Okay, we're actually going to take a look at an article that makes the argument, which I really like personally, but of course, I've been grading long enough. I push my personal feelings aside and grade the paper for what it is. But it makes the argument that the drinking age should be 19, only in bars and restaurants, and only less than 10% alcohol. Okay, so you can have beer and wine, basically, right? The idea here is 19. Most people are out of high school. 99.9% of people are out of high school. A lot of people grow up quite a bit between the ages of 18 and 19. Okay? A lot of times they graduate high school, they maybe get their first apartment or go to college, are taking steps into adulthood. Also, if it's only in bars and restaurants, it means you, in theory, and largely in practice, you have a sober person serving them, right? So it's hard to get dangerously drunk if you have a sober person serving them alcohol. Also, it doesn't take as long, or it takes much longer to get drunk on beer and wine than it does doing shots, okay? I had a fraternity brother that almost died because he drank, basically a whole bottle of whiskey. We had to take him to the hospital. He ended up being fine and learned a major lesson from it. But he was underage. Now, you can make an argument for it being 18 if you want to. You get a lot of adult privileges at 18. You can make an argument to keep it at 21. Okay? There's lots of valid arguments for keeping it at 21. Okay? I would not make an argument to raise the drinking age. Okay? I don't think I've ever had a paper get higher than about a C+ making arguments for raising the drinking age, because the arguments are simply, to be honest, just kind of weak. Okay? Are you telling me that I can be a congressman, but I can't have alcohol? That doesn't make any sense. Okay? Next topic, legalization of marijuana. You could make an argument to keep it illegal, legalize it medically, legalize it recreationally. The states in the last 5 to 10 years who have legalized it for medicinal purposes have done a fairly good job. Is there abuse? Of course. But I'm sure there's supermodels that use Ozempic. Somebody who's 6'2" and 98 pounds is using Ozempic to stay thin. So there's abuse. But for the most part, the medical programs have been pretty good. Florida has actually done a pretty good job with it in terms of medical marijuana. Military drafts. And you could also put this into civil service. I don't know if you remember this essay you read at the beginning of the chapter about advocating some sort of program where people do a year of service outside of high school before they can go to college, whether it's civil service, working for the foreign service, going into the military, something like that to get back to the country before they can go to college, which some countries do it. I know Germany does. It works fairly well. Now there's, of course, countries like Israel who have mandatory 2 years of military service right out of high school as long as you're physically able. But their location and situation makes for that to be a necessity in their eyes. Gambling laws. I'm here on the Atmore campus across the freeway from a casino, but that's not technically in the state of Alabama now, is it? Indian casinos, they're on semi-autonomous nations. What is going on here? Seem to be frozen. Okay. They seem to be they're not seem to be, they are semi-autonomous nations, so they have different rules. But maybe you want to see casino-style gambling at Gulf Shores, like they have in Mississippi. Maybe you'd like to see a state lottery in Alabama. Maybe you want to argue against the state lottery in Alabama. All those are valid things to do. High school exit exams. These were big 20 years ago or so for a period of 5 to 10 years, and then they've kind of petered out as we've discovered. The teachers are forced to not actually teach kids, they're just forced to teach to the test so the school gets funded. And that doesn't really educate people. But there are still schools that have high school exit exams where you have to prove that you know a certain amount before you can graduate. I kind of call this the star quarterback rule. You know, the cliche that, you know, you have a star quarterback at the high school that gets straight A's even though he sleeps through all his classes, you know, because nobody wants to make him eligible to play. So the idea is that with grade inflation, you can actually show you know basic sets of skills to graduate high school. But by the same token, a lot of these tests have racial and ethnic biases. You know, if you're teaching at a low-income school that has a lot of minorities in it, and you have a question, you know, Tim is on the golf course and he hits a drive 200 meters, but hits an oak tree, and it bounces at this angle. So, you know, how far back did it come? Well, while they can probably figure it out, if you're using a reference that is unfamiliar to someone, right? It'd be like if you put a multiple choice question on an exit exam about hip hop. I don't know a lot about it. I'm little. I know Diddy's a weirdo, but that's it. So there's arguments on both sides. Euthanasia. This is basically physician-assisted suicide. It's legal in a couple of states, but it is controversial, of course. But one thing I do want to make clear, if you're going to use this topic and argue for it to be illegal, you need to do the research on the practice where it's currently legal. For example, I may not get this 100% correct, but in places like, I think, Oregon, it's legal. You have to have a confirmed terminal illness where the confirmation is done by 3 different doctors. You have to get a psychiatrist, or maybe 2, to confirm that you're with it, that you know what you're doing, that you're of sound mind. And then basically the doctor gives you the medication that you administer yourself. The doctor doesn't actually push the button, so to speak. Okay? And this is in terms of terminal illnesses that cause constant pain. You know, the argument in favor of allowing euthanasia is that you provide relief for people who are in constant pain and have no hope of getting better. The counter argument, of course, is advancements in medical science. Is it ethical for a doctor to end their life because it can go against the Hippocratic Oath? There's all sorts of stuff. Now, one thing you couldn't say is God says you shouldn't do that. Okay, the Bible, religion, not an argument you can make on this paper at all. Okay, so no Bible, no Torah, no Quran, religious texts. You have to keep your arguments secular on this paper. All right? Questions? I know I'm going over time, but we'll go through it. Green laws. Maybe you think that all cars should either be electric or get at least 25 miles to the gallon by 2040. Maybe you think that coastal should put in solar panels. Maybe you think that we should pledge to cut our greenhouse emissions in half in the next 10 years. Something like that. Animal research. This is both medical and for products. This is one where, as computers become more and more advanced, the ethical question about testing on animals becomes kind of a murky area. Now, there's a lot of medicines and vaccines. Do we develop a COVID vaccine from zero to application in less than a year without animal testing? Probably not. But by the same token, do we really need to put mascara inside a rabbit's eyes for hours before killing them just to see if it's going to hurt people? There's a lot of stuff there that you can talk on either side. And as you might be discovering with a lot of these issues, is they're not, you can make a valid argument on either side of them, okay? Cloning laws. Now there's two types of cloning. Reproductive cloning, which is trying to clone, people who can't have children, making a clone. So far, that's illegal and hasn't been successfully done. They've done it in animals, but they don't tend to live very long. And then there's therapeutic cloning. And this, is going to be an ethical question in your lifetime because the more they discover, the more they're looking at being able to, say you need a heart transplant. You have some genetic disorder in your heart. They take some of your heart tissue, take out the genetic marker for the disorder, regrow you a heart from your own tissue, and put it in your chest. Not yet, but they're getting close. They're being able to tease stem cells into certain things where it does look like that technology is going to be here in the near future. But that raises ethical questions. If you're rich enough, what's stopping you from basically making a clone of yourself other than the head? And, when you get 80, 70 years old and you're aching, it's just like, well, cut off my head and put it on my 20-year-old body. That seems far-fetched, but we went from the first airplane in 1903 to being 300,000 miles away on the moon in 1969. This is an age of quite a lot of scientific advancement. All right, prostitution. And before you get mad at me, there is an argument to be made that many problems associated with prostitution can be solved by legalizing. Let's think of some of the problems. Drug use among prostitutes. Well, if it's legalized and they're drug tested every week, they can't use drugs. Pimps or other types of men abusing the prostitutes, abusing the women. Can they go to the cops? Probably not, because they're a prostitute, right? But if you're in a legal brothel, if a client beats you up, you can go straight to the cops. Prostitutes tend to be in seedy or crime-ridden areas. Well, if you have legal brothels, you can put them in a safe area. Now, there's still issues of potential human trafficking and ethical issues. I know I read that there's a legal brothel in Pahrump, Nevada. I think there's 3 counties in Nevada where it's legal. And one of they call them courtesans, said that she gets probably about 40% of her Johns are married men. So that's a problem for a lot of people, in a lot of people's eyes. So there's pros and cons. But my point is that don't just dismiss it because we view prostitution as kind of icky. Well, it's called the oldest profession for a reason. Maternity, paternity leave. In this country, it's not even every company. You have to have a company of a certain size. The only required by law maternity leave is that you have to save the woman's job for 12 weeks. That's it. In certain European countries, some of the Scandinavian countries, a woman gets a year of paid leave for maternity leave. I don't know if it's full pay, but some companies offer paternity leave as well, where the father can spend the first couple of weeks at home with the baby and the mother, because if you've ever had a kid, those first couple of weeks with your first child are a bit of an adjustment. Finally, drones, military or private. Amazon's talking about having drone delivery. I guess this could also even bleed into like self-driving cars. In San Francisco and a couple other cities, they have taxis that have no driver. You get in. Now you have to have the app and put the exact address you want to go to. But you get in, you scan the app in the car, and the car takes you there. So we have that technology, but it can cause some questions. But then also, drones create privacy issues. Say you have, house A, where creepy guy lives. House B, family with 3 teenage daughters. The teenage daughters have their friends over for a pool party. Well, creepy guy next door has a drone and just puts it up above his own backyard to film the pool party. Should that be legal? He's above his own house. Just can happen to see over the neighbor's yard. I think that is illegal. Or I certainly hope a cop would find it illegal. But that's a question. As drones become less expensive, most people, if they really want one, can afford a pretty good quality drone. It costs the same as like a PlayStation or a decent computer. So these are the topics on the law changing. Okay, and as I mentioned, you can make an argument to keep a controversial law the same. Option 2, and this isn't going to take as long, I promise. You can use the stories that were on the list for literary analysis essay. Again, you have to write a new paper. Now, if you use the same story and you're using a few things that are similar, that's fine. You just can't copy and paste the paper and tweak it 1 or 2 things and turn in basically the same essay. You have to do a new essay. Okay, some things to consider. We're getting there. Thesis that's underlined that makes a clear defensible claim, presents the issue early in the paper, takes a clear stand on the issue while presenting other sides of the topic, evidence that appeals to reason, your own character, and to the emotions of your audience. I'm going to go over, if you're watching this online, in the PowerPoint, going over the ways that we can appeal to our audience or make an argument. It's written in 12-point font, Times New Roman, all that sort of stuff. Do remember, both with the career essay and this essay, if it's not formatted correctly, you just lose points. Okay? There's no correcting it. At least 1,200 words. Remember that the works cited page does not count. You have to have at least 4 valid sources. It's submitted to Canvas by the due date. And finally, the rubric. Notice this is worth 200 points. Or basically worth 2 in the first paper. But it's a standard rubric. But one thing I do want to call your attention to is on the grammar and mechanics section. That's where your grade on citation is going to go. You will have feedback on the career essay before you turn in this paper. I expect that your citation stuff is not going to be perfect, but probably 90% correct on this paper, because my expectation is that you put in your best effort on the career essay, and if you make some mistakes because you're not familiar with it, I point out those mistakes and you can correct them for the argument essay. All right, other things in this packet, and this doesn't necessarily apply to online classes, but I have a link to argumentative essays from Howell Purdue, and also at the end I have a sample paper that you can take the extra credit quiz on. Okay? Any questions before I turn off the video? Nope. No, it doesn't have the extra credit. It's going to be a quiz on, so it's going to be kind of like a reading quiz on the sample essay. So basically, if you read the sample essay twice, take notes, do all the active reading stuff that we want to do, and then sit down and take the quiz, you should get 100%. All right, any other questions? All righty, let me shut off the video. Go about our day.